Welcome to our deep dive into South Africa's riveting journey from the shadows of oppression to the light of freedom. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more interesting content. Now let's set the stage. Picture a land of diverse cultures and breathtaking landscapes, a place rich in resources and potential. This is South Africa, a country with a history as complex and fascinating as its people. But beneath this surface lies a past marked by struggle and conflict. From the earliest days of colonial rule to the fall of apartheid, South Africa's path to freedom has been a long and arduous one. In this series we'll explore the key events and figures that shaped this journey, starting with the dark past. So, fasten your seatbelts as we embark on this historical ride into South Africa's tumultuous yet inspiring past. Have you ever pondered the price of freedom? Today we delve into South Africa's dark history, a journey marked by struggle and resilience. Our story begins in the earliest days of colonial rule, when the indigenous peoples of South Africa first encountered European settlers. These initial interactions, characterized by a profound cultural clash, set the stage for centuries of conflict and resistance. The Europeans, driven by a thirst for wealth and power, imposed their will on the native populations, exploiting the land and its people with little regard for their rights or traditions. This era of colonial dominance culminated in the establishment of the Union of South Africa in 1910, a political entity that served to entrench the power of the white minority. In the shadow of colonial rule and racial segregation, the Union of South Africa was a ticking time bomb, a nation on the brink of a long and tumultuous struggle for freedom and equality. In 1948, a chilling term surfaced in South Africa's political landscape: apartheid. The term, which means apartness in Afrikaans, set the stage for one of the most oppressive eras in human history. It was a legalized system of discrimination, a policy that enforced racial segregation and political and economic control by the minority over the majority. Apartheid was more than just a policy. It was a meticulously planned and executed blueprint for racial hierarchy. The National Party, who took power in that fateful year of 1948, developed a comprehensive series of laws that divided South Africans into four racial groups: white, black, colored, and Indian. Each group was segregated into different residential and business areas, with the best areas reserved for the white minority. The system was enforced with an iron fist, leaving no room for opposition or dissent. The implementation of apartheid didn't happen overnight. It was a slow and calculated process that stripped away the rights of the non-white majority, bit by bit. The Population Registration Act of 1950 required that every South African be racially classified into one of the four categories. The Group Areas Act followed, dictating where each racial group could live and work. Then came the Bantu Education Act, which created a separate and unequal education system designed to prepare Black Africans for lives as a laboring class. But apartheid was more than a series of oppressive laws. It was a brutal regime that brought about widespread human rights abuses. Non-white South Africans faced daily humiliation and dehumanization. They were denied political representation, economic opportunity, and basic human dignity. It was a system that managed to institutionalize racism, making it a part of everyday life. The impact of apartheid was profound and far-reaching. It left deep scars on the social, economic, and political fabric of South Africa, many of which are still visible today. The non-white majority bore the brunt of this injustice, living under a constant cloud of fear, uncertainty, and despair. Apartheid, a system that institutionalized racial segregation, cast a long, dark shadow over South Africa. It was an era that tested the resilience and spirit of the South African people, setting the stage for a struggle for freedom that would captivate the world. Oppression breeds resistance, and in South Africa, the seeds of defiance were sown. As the iron grip of apartheid tightened, the African National Congress, or ANC, took form. Born out of the collective frustration and desperation of a people yearning for freedom, the ANC set out on a path of peaceful resistance. The ANC initially adopted a non-violent approach, following in the footsteps of Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of civil disobedience. This strategy was manifest in campaigns such as the Defiance Campaign of 1952, where thousands of volunteers defied unjust apartheid laws, a peaceful protest against the system that oppressed them. They believed that through unity and peaceful protest, they could expose the inhumanity of apartheid and bring about change. However, the peaceful resistance was met with brutal force. The Sharpeville massacre of 1960 stands as a stark reminder of this. On that fateful day, A peaceful protest against the pass laws turned into a bloodbath when the police opened fire on the crowd, killing 69 people and wounding nearly 200. The world was shocked. This event was a turning point, not only for the ANC, but for the entire anti-apartheid movement. The brutality of the Sharpeville massacre exposed the true face of apartheid to the world, and it marked a significant shift in the ANC's strategy. The peaceful protests had been met with violence, and the ANC realized the struggle against apartheid would not be won through peaceful means alone. The decision to embrace armed resistance was a difficult one, but the ANC felt it had no other choice. The Sharpeville massacre marked a tragic but pivotal moment in South Africa's history, igniting a flame of resistance. It galvanized the ANC and the South African people, transforming the struggle against apartheid from a peaceful protest into a determined and relentless fight for freedom. The seeds of defiance that were sown had begun to sprout. The struggle for freedom had entered a new, more confrontational phase. The resistance had truly begun. In the midst of despair, a beacon of hope emerged: Nelson Mandela. As South Africa drowned in the depths of racial segregation and violence, Mandela rose from obscurity, his voice echoing the sentiments of the oppressed. Mandela joined the African National Congress, or ANC, in the early 1940s, an organization that had been fighting against the system of racial segregation. He was not just a member, he was a catalyst, a force that would stir the stagnant waters of resistance. His charisma and conviction propelled him quickly through the ranks, and he found himself at the helm of the ANC's Youth League. But the peaceful protests and petitions of the ANC seemed to be falling on deaf ears. The government's response was one of brutality and repression, not negotiation. Mandela, once an advocate of nonviolence, began to see the need for a stronger response. He argued for armed resistance against the apartheid regime, a bold stance that marked a pivotal turn in the struggle for freedom. His advocacy for armed resistance led to the creation of Umkhonto we Sizwe, or Spear of the Nation, the armed wing of the ANC. But this shift in strategy was not without consequences. In the early 60s, Mandela and other ANC leaders were arrested and charged with sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. The Rivonia trial, as it became known, was a spectacle that drew international attention. Mandela's powerful courtroom speech, where he spoke of a democratic and free society, resonated with millions. His words were not just a defense, but a declaration, a vision of the South Africa he was willing to die for. Sentenced to life imprisonment, Mandela was sent to Robben Island, a place notorious for its harsh conditions. But even within the confines of his cell, Mandela continued his fight. His spirit remained unbroken, his resolve unshaken. Imprisoned but not silenced, Mandela became the symbol of South Africa's struggle for freedom. His name became synonymous with resistance, his story a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Even from the depths of Robben Island, Mandela was rising, and South Africa was rising with him. As the 70s and 80s rolled in, the world could no longer turn a blind eye to South Africa's plight. Throughout these tumultuous decades, South Africa became a global focal point. The international community began to take decisive action, imposing sanctions against the country in a bid to dismantle the oppressive apartheid regime. These sanctions, enacted by numerous nations and international bodies, had a profound impact on South Africa's economy, further isolating the country and forcing it to confront the inhumanity of its policies. Parallel to these economic pressures, people worldwide were standing up in solidarity with South Africa's oppressed majority. From London to Sydney, New York to Tokyo, streets became seas of protest, with millions demanding an end to apartheid. This global outcry was a testament to humanity's shared belief in equality and justice, demonstrating that the world was not just watching, but actively pushing back against South Africa's racial segregation. Just as the world of politics and economics was rallying against apartheid, so too were the worlds of sports and music. Athletes and musicians used their platforms to raise awareness and inspire action. South Africa was barred from the Olympics and other major sporting events, while musicians held concerts and wrote songs condemning apartheid. These acts of solidarity were not just symbolic, but also crucial in amplifying the message against racial discrimination to a global audience. The music of the time was a powerful tool. It painted a vivid picture of the struggles faced by the South African people, stirring emotions and galvanizing support. Similarly, the absence of South Africa from international sports was a stark reminder of the country's pariah status, a consequence of its oppressive policies. In the face of mounting international pressure and collective global action, the apartheid regime began to falter. The world's collective voice had become a roar too loud to ignore, a call for justice that reverberated across continents. Under increasing global pressure, cracks began to show in the apartheid regime. In the face of relentless resistance and international pressure, the apartheid regime began to crumble. The late 80s were a pivotal time in South Africa. The government, headed by President F.W. de Klerk, was faced with an insurmountable international pressure and a rising internal unrest. The walls of the apartheid were starting to show cracks. Among the most significant of these cracks was the release of Nelson Mandela in February 1990. After 27 long years behind bars, Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison, an emblem of resilience and a beacon of hope for millions of South Africans. His release marked a crucial turning point in the struggle against apartheid, a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who fought for equality and freedom. But Mandela's release was not an isolated event. It was part of a broader movement towards change. In the same year, the African National Congress, or the ANC, was unbanned. This organization, once considered a threat to the apartheid regime, was now recognized as a legitimate political force. The unbanning of the ANC and other political organizations signaled a profound shift in the country's political landscape. This shift paved the way for negotiations for a new democratic South Africa. These negotiations, often contentious and fraught with challenges, were nevertheless a crucial part of the journey towards a post-apartheid nation. They aimed to dismantle the structures of apartheid and establish a society founded on democratic principles and respect for human rights. The negotiations were a testament to the spirit of compromise and reconciliation. They were about crafting a new narrative for a country that had been scarred by decades of racial segregation and injustice. They were about envisioning a future where all South Africans, regardless of their race or ethnicity, could live in dignity and freedom. The fall of apartheid did not happen overnight. It was a process, a long, arduous journey marked by sacrifice, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to justice and equality. With the fall of apartheid, a new chapter was about to begin for South Africa. 1994 marked a milestone in South Africa's history, the dawn of democracy. This was a year etched into the annals of time, a year that saw the country's first democratic elections. South Africans of all races queued in long, winding lines, their hearts pulsating with the anticipation of casting their votes for the first time. It was a powerful testament to the human spirit, a triumph over decades of racial segregation and oppression. The election not only marked the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new chapter under the leadership of Nelson Mandela. Mandela, a man who had spent 27 years in prison for his fight against apartheid, became the country's first black president. His presidency symbolized a new era of hope, unity, and reconciliation. Mandela believed in the power of forgiveness and reconciliation. He understood that in order for South Africa to move forward, it had to confront its past. And so, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established. Its aim was to provide a platform for victims of gross human rights violations to share their stories, and for perpetrators to come forward, confess their crimes, and seek amnesty. Under Mandela's leadership, South Africa began to make significant strides in addressing the deep-seated racial inequalities that had been entrenched by decades of apartheid rule. However, the road to transformation was and remains a long and arduous one. The country continues to grapple with issues of inequality, poverty, and corruption. But despite these challenges, the spirit of resilience and hope that defined the struggle against apartheid continues to inspire the nation's journey towards a more equitable and inclusive society. From the dark shadow of apartheid emerged a new South Africa, a beacon of hope and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As we reflect on South Africa's tumultuous past, we are reminded of the true price of freedom. We've journeyed through the dark past, bearing witness to the emergence of apartheid, a system that sought to segregate and oppress based on the color of one's skin. This era was fraught with injustice, but it also ignited a spark of resistance. We saw the rise of a beacon of hope in the face of adversity, Nelson Mandela. His courage and relentless pursuit of equality shook the world and brought international attention to the plight of his people. As the world took notice, an overwhelming wave of support began to build, applying pressure, and eventually leading to the fall of apartheid. In this new dawn, South Africa began to heal, to build, and to grow. But the journey to freedom was not without its scars, and these must never be forgotten. It's crucial to remember this history, not to dwell in the past, but to learn from it. To understand how far we've come, and how far we still have to go. The struggle for freedom in South Africa serves as a powerful reminder. It teaches us that change, though often slow and painful, is possible. It shows us the strength of the human spirit, and the power of unity in the face of adversity. It underscores the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it's not popular or easy. We must remember the sacrifices made, the lives lost, and the battles fought. We must honor those who stood tall, who fought tirelessly, and who never gave up hope, because it is through their struggle, their resilience, and their courage that we understand the true meaning of freedom. In the words of Nelson Mandela, to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. Let us always strive to live by these words, to honor the past, and to build a better, more inclusive future.